Back in the basement today to talk about this Texas Strength Systems G1 power bar, in this case, in stainless steel. It's advertised as an aggressive IPF spec bar at a very low cost of $349. And this bar has actually really quickly become the go-to bar for many high-end USAPL meets. In fact, I used it at USAPL Raw Nationals last year, 2023 in Memphis, Tennessee. It was used in the most recent Masters World Cup, also in Memphis, Tennessee. And it's actually going to be used in the Open World Cup held end of this month in Albany, New York, which I'll be competing in. So really have been a go-to bar for a lot of these higher end meets in conjunction with a lot of TSS stuff, right? Like we've seen their combos all over the place. You've probably seen their chrome plates a lot more frequently as well. They're really doing their service to get their name out there when it comes to a lot of these meets. Now, where their combos and other actual lifting equipment is made in-house in Texas, the bars, the discs, those are all imported. So these are import bars that we're talking about, but still at $349 for what could be an aggressive IPF spec comp bar in stainless. Tell me more. So let's get a little bit into it. I'm going to break down this bar real quick for you, give some feedback on it, who it's for, who it's not for. First, let's start with the sleeves and kind of work our way back in. Interesting thing to note is if you look at this bar on their website, which you probably would if you're interested in buying it, the sleeve pictures look like it has a very aggressively ribbed sleeve, overly pronounced, similar to like what you'll see on the Bells of Steel Bare Naked Power Bar. In reality, not the case. Now they're still ribbed, they're not smooth. I know some people are anti-ribbing, but it would be what I would consider normal in this case. And again, not the extreme pronounced version that you'll see on the website or on the Bells of Steel bar. Another thing that's interesting about this bar is the collar on the actual end of the sleeve is tapered. Weird, but actually pretty smart when you think about it. A lot of comp plates that we use have really tight tolerances on the holes. Hard to get it on and hard to get it off. So having that little taper is a nice, friendly, neighborly welcome saying, hey, come on in, it's nice in here. So I do like that and surprised I haven't seen that on more bars. But to be honest, I never thought about it because I've never seen that on any other bars. Probably someone will give me some examples in the comment box. Be sure to do. Turn me on to some new bars. Lord knows I need it. Working our way back in, you do get the standard, what I would consider at this point, comp style collars of all IPF spec bars, meaning they're extremely thin. Blessing and a curse, right? So why have these kind of collars on a barbell? Well, if you lift in the IPF or USAPL or one of its affiliates, the goal here is to have a very stiff power bar. So combine those with the fact that this is 29 millimeters diameter. It's going to get the weight plates in as close as they possibly can, because again, the collars would typically push weights out. It's going to leave you as stiff as bar as possible. So the least amount of flex, which I think is ideal if you're using one bar for all three lifts. Can be a bit humbling on deadlifts if you're not used to it, or if you don't compete in a federation that does. But I personally like competing on as stiff a bar as possible, because if I ever were to go pull on a deadlift bar, it would then be easier to do so in my opinion, and not vice versa. If you train all the time on a deadlift bar and then go and do a meet that uses this bar, you're going to be in for a rude awakening. Now, the downside to having these style of comp style collars on a barbell is if you're training at home like me and have a rack that's a little bit on the wider side. This is a Rogue Fitness RM5, I'll call it, but it's 49 inches wide, which as you can probably see, leaves the collars extremely close to the actual uprights. Put some plates on and walk out a squat, and you will quickly be reminded about how little room you have and little room for error. Now, there are some ways around it. Obviously, you can clean up your squat, but even those of you with a pristine squat, probably gonna bang the uprights every now and then, or you're going to be forced to take a lot of micro steps out. So change your walkout, not the 2 or 3 step drop. You're gonna be doing like 10 steps just to make sure you inch your way back. And if you're working on a heavy 1 rep max or just your top set, you don't wanna exert extra energy to do that. And you also don't wanna be put off by banging into the upright and feeling like you're gonna die. Not gonna have a good time. So a little bit of downside to this bar. Of course, the workaround is really get a good walkout, like a really good walkout. Or you can add stuff on here like collars or change plates to kind of push the weight out a little bit further, give you a little bit of a buffer, but again, kind of defeats the purpose of having a comp style bar. But it is what it is. If you have a maybe not as wide rack like a Rep Fitness one at 47 inches, maybe you're lifting out of a combo, you won't have that issue. But I do want to call that out because people do run into that. And if you're not expecting it, kind of sucks, okay? So coming on in, let's get back to the shaft. It's 29 millimeters, like I mentioned. This one's in stainless steel. They also offer a black Cerakote and a chrome version. Either of those lists for $299. As mentioned previously, the stainless steel is offered at $349, which to me is a good deal. Before we even get to like the specs or anything else, or how the knurl feels or how it performs, $349 for an IPF spec comp style bar is phenomenal. I mean, you take a look at some of the other options out there. If you're looking at Rogue, you're looking at $450 starting point. If you're looking at like my daily driver, and the bar I like the most is the Hansu stainless steel IPF power bar, currently listed at $591. If you want to be a true IPF boy and grab on the Eleiko bare steel bar, that's up to like $1,200, which is funny because the actual stainless steel one, which I don't think is IPF approved, but it's the same bar just in stainless, that's like $1,100. So the first time a stainless steel bar is cheaper than a bare steel bar, but you're still talking about over $1,000. Things are wild. Some of the other bars I have, like the Usaka bar, which isn't even stainless steel, that's like $1,000. So $349 for this type of bar just on paper, it sounds really good. Now, in the advertising, I mentioned it lists as an aggressive feeling bar, but I've already talked about how the pictures of the sleeves are off, and they don't really provide any other specs on this bar on this website. It needs updating. That website needs some work. Some web developers, holler at your boy. I can pick up the slack and help you guys out. But it's advertised as aggressive knurling. Spoiler alert, every single power bar I've ever come across, from the most part, advertises itself as having aggressive knurl. Not always the case. This one, however, is aggressive, but it's not overly aggressive to the point where it becomes novelty or unusable, similar to like the Rogue Agro 3, which is probably the sharpest bar I own, but also a bar that I rarely use just because why do that to yourself? It doesn't add anything to the bar more than just being a novelty. So let's talk about the knurl. Like I said, it's aggressive. We'll pixel peep in a second, but you have pretty much a standard setup with powerlifting knurl marks. You do have a center knurl patch right here. It's 4 3/4 inches. So a little bit on the smaller side that I like, still within IPF spec. I just like the max spec, which I believe is like 160 millimeters, which is up to like 6.5 inches, I think, somewhere around there. I'll math on the screen after the fact, but I like a wider center knurl personally, just because I like that grip on my back. But this is serviceable, it's fine. It doesn't make a tremendous difference, but just given the choice, I'd like another inch or two. Wouldn't we all? The nice thing here is the actual center knurl pattern is the same as the rest of the bar. And what I mean by that is you'll come across some power bars that surprisingly will have a more passive patch compared to the rest of the bar. Usaka, I'm looking at you. Other bars do it as well. But especially for a comp bar, it doesn't make sense to me. Give me the same knurling throughout, and also just a little bit more of it. A little bit. But overall, good. Termination point's good. Nothing really sloppy. The knurl here is uniform, which I like. Typically on import bars, especially on more affordable import bars, you do get a lot of inconsistencies across the shaft where, you know, things kind of flatten out some here or a little bit sharper here. You get pretty much the same thing everywhere, which I really like. And like I said, clean termination points, which is also nice to see. The knurl does not roll out all the way to the sleeves. You have a little bit of room. And speaking of the sleeves, one last thing, this does have really good rotation on the sleeves for a power bar, which shouldn't be that important, but I know some people care. So some people have knocked the Hansu one that I have because they say it doesn't spin very well. Power bar shouldn't have to spin, but this one really smooth, no issues. So if you're into that kind of thing, then you're into it. Cool. Let's talk about the knurling itself. Again, advertised as aggressive, I would say it's aggressive. Let's pixel peep because this makes things easier to explain. So the knurl pattern on here, I would consider aggressive, but it is not mountain knurl. So it's not pointy sharp, but I would equate this to what we in the biz call tall canos. So not volcanoes, not small canos. These are tall canos, which means the tops of the mountains just were never formed. So you're left with this very little volcano on the top, which means that the actual feel of this bar is really, really good. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about TPI in a second. If you don't know what that is, I'll try to give you a quick rundown. If you don't care, skip ahead. I'll try to put timestamps in. TPI, but just basically means tops per inch. You know, how many of that knurl pattern can you fit within an inch space? Typically speaking, the higher the TPI, or the more tops you can get in an inch space, the smaller knurl pattern you get, which means everything's kind of more compact, which means you can't cut as deep because there's a lot more heads but because they're all packed in together tightly, it tends to be really, really grippy. An example here, which I'll show you a visual of, is a Kabuki power bar, which a lot of people love the knurl on that. That's more of around a 25 TPI. Speaking of something that also a lot of people like is the Rogue Ohio power bar. That's more around the 16 TPI mark, so lower, which means the peaks or the actual knurl pieces are bigger, which means you can technically cut them a little bit deeper because you have a little bit more space to play with, so they're more defined. However, with the Ohio power bar, at least the base version, you have what I would consider average volcano. So you have the tops not formed, but it leaves a lot of contact points. So you get a really nice mix of both bigger chunks, if you will, but also lots of contact points. So you have a semi-aggressive, very grippy bar, which is probably why lots of people like the Ohio power bar as a daily driver. This bar in particular is a little bit of a head scratcher because if I were to measure TPI in this bar, I actually get right around 15 or 16. So more towards the Ohio power bar range. But when I take a look at the knurl itself, they are very small knurls. So more in the 20 to 22 range, I would say normally compared to my other bars, but they're spaced out more. So the channels between the knurling, and I don't know if there's a technical term for that or not, is more defined, which means these are spaced out further, which allows them, in my opinion, to feel a little bit more deep and grippy. So like looking at this, it doesn't look like it should feel as sharp or aggressive as it does, but in reality, it would be on the more aggressive side, especially for an IPF spec comp bar, because typically you get something more akin to the Ohio power bar, the Eleiko bar, and again, hopefully I'm flashing examples of what these look like here. And this one, pixel peeping, doesn't look great, but I gotta say, it feels really good. In fact, this is borderline for me, something that would be too aggressive for a daily driver. I've used it as one for squatting, for benching, for deadlifting. Again, hopefully showing clips of all this happening because no one wants to look at my face for the length of this video. But on rep work for a deadlift, like it does start to wear on your hands a little bit. Or if you have like a really low bar position, you might start feeling this on your scap some where it starts to chew through your skin a little bit depending on, how tough you are. How tough are you? Pretty tough if you're watching this video. But it is borderline too aggressive for me. Like I'm in the situation where I have a lot of bars, obviously, so I can rotate a lot. And I still don't find that this is like my normal go-to grab bar, but it definitely could be if I wanted something with a little bit better bite. But again, the price point here is just so compelling. $349 versus something like $450 for the Rogue versus $590 for the Hansu. Again, assuming we're looking at stainless steel, it's just such a compelling story. And factor in the fact that it has aggressive knurling. This is a really good bar at the end of the day. So who is it for? This bar is for someone who, number one, wants or is okay with a competition spec bar. Right? Those thin collars are a deal breaker. If you can't do thin collars, this bar is not for you. On a side note, if you can't do rib sleeves, this bar is not for you either. If you're looking for, past that point, something in stainless steel, it's hard to say no to this bar based off of the price point, right? $349 for a stainless steel bar. Yes, it's an import, but the tolerances on the sleeve are good. The knurl termination is great. You don't have really any slop or play. You get those tapered ends of getting plates on and off. A lot I liked about that. Thirdly, if you like a barbell that's on the more aggressive side, but not too aggressive where it becomes novelty, this might be the Goldilocks bar for you if you want that aggressive feel barbell. Who's this bar not for? If you just want a good all-purpose power bar, probably not for you. You might find that this is a little bit too sharp for your needs. You might find that the competition collars get a little bit annoying on a wider rack, but still the price point is really compelling if you're looking at stainless steel. If you don't care about stainless steel, there's other bars cheaper that'll do just as good. There's the Bells of Steel Bare Naked Power Bar, which I already mentioned, that's like $200. There's the Hansu Bright Zinc Bar, which is less aggressive than this, but it's around $212. So there are cheaper bars out there, but as a complete package for $350, $349 if you want to be anal about it, this is a really good bar, and you should at least consider it if you're looking at a powerlifting specific stainless steel bar that won't break the bank and is on the more aggressive side. Let me know what comments or questions you have about it in the comment box below. But in the meantime, as always, thanks for watching and stay big.